Hi, and welcome to ChangeNOW for this session on coalitions. How do we create coalition to accelerate change? We're here for change now. We need to remember that. So coalitions really to turn commitments into strong actions on the ground. That's one of the raison d'être of ChangeNOW. That's why we're all here, trying to join a movement that is bigger than what we are doing individually in our own organization. For my part, I'm Katell Goulven. I'm joining from INSEAD, the business school for the world. And there I head an institute, the Hoffmann Institute, which has a mission to integrate sustainability into everything that our school does. We're not there yet, we still have some work to do, but the objective is really that we need to transform business education so that we have more leaders and more managers who are walking the talk on sustainability. We are the proud academic partner of ChangeNOW, again, joining forces with others beyond all our campuses, territories in 4 regions. And today we'll be really bringing experts from business, from civil society, from government, and from international organizations to see how they all build coalition to accelerate change. And I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Inger Andersen. She is the executive director of the UN Environment Program, meaning that as part of the whole UN complex ecosystem, she's the one with the highest level to really speak for and work for nature. You'll see her resume, it's on the program, check it out. She has been spending her whole career working on international development and sustainable development, from water to desertification to biodiversity, climate change. She's done it all, but in a recent interview I listened about her, 2 things really resonated with me. The first one is that she started her career on international development as a teacher in rural Sudan. And the second one is that her drive for sustainable development really started when she was a little girl and her grandmother was telling her to speak to the trees. With this, Inger, over to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you, and what a pleasure it is to be here. And can I just thank you and the Hoffmann Global Institute for Business and Society and everybody at INSEAD for this opportunity. And I have been asked to speak on this absolutely critical issue of sustainability in our planet. And let me start out by saying that humanity is really an astonishing, we are an astonishing species. We made incredible and rapid advances in human health, in transport, in energy, in food production, in infrastructure. Even at this event, it's a marvel, isn't it? Despite the pandemic forcing us apart, we can communicate effectively and instantly across distances. We've made all of these advances in the last hundreds of years, and in a period that in evolutionary terms is just a blink of an eye. And so in our haste, though, to adopt new technologies that have made our lives better, we didn't really think about the long-term consequences. And now, today, we're paying the price. Our high carbon and resource intensive economy models are warming our planet. They're destroying nature and biodiversity. We're undermining the very foundations of our existence, and we are contributing to the emergence of pandemics and diseases. We are polluting the air, the land, and the sea, and we are increasingly seeing inequality, at least so that those with least access to benefits of human development are the ones who suffer the very most from its unwelcome side effects. And so today, I want to speak about what we can do to change, what you can do to change, and what we can do, each one of us, to transform our societies so that they will operate in harmony with nature. But first, before I step into this, it's probably important just to take a quick snapshot at the depth of each of the 3 planetary crises that have placed us in so much peril. And the first crisis I want to speak about is the climate crisis. We speak about these 3 planetary crises: crisis of climate, crisis of nature, and crisis of pollution. Climate. Well, we all know that concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are higher than they've been at any time in the last 800,000 years. 800,000 years. Now, we can all see the consequences, the storms, the heat waves, the forest fires, the droughts, the locusts. It's a biblical kind of situation we're finding ourselves in, and we are approaching these tipping points. Warming oceans are melting the ice, which means less reflected sunlight and therefore more heating. The permafrost is disappearing. We're releasing therefore more methane into the atmosphere, which is a very powerful gas. We're burning the forests that deprives us of the carbon sinks, and we're facing a system cascade that will send global temperatures through the roof. So the second crisis that I just want to paint for you ever so briefly, and you referenced when I was young. Well, when I was young, I also used to play in the woods with my brothers. And I remember the air thick with noise and insects and melodic bird song, and it was vibrant and loud. But today, if you are in nature, what do you hear? And perhaps you hear silence. In 2019, a study looking at just North America found that there are 3 billion fewer birds than 50 years ago. And what do you see? Not so many bugs, not so many insects, and they are amongst the pollinators that over a quarter of our food crops rely on. And it's all down to us. We, people, humanity, has altered 75% of land and 66% of marine environment. And an estimated 4.3 million hectares of humid tropical primary forests, that's the size of my little country, Denmark, which is big, is lost every year. So we're losing primary forests at this catastrophic speed due to agriculture, due to livestock, and due to infrastructure expansion. And as we degrade our ecosystems, we're chipping away at the very foundations of what makes well-being and our existence possible. Food, water, temperature regulation, economic growth, the roofs over our heads, and the clothes we wear, everything depends on nature. And so the third crisis that I want to talk about is pollution and waste, and just give a little vignette here. Most of us have breathed dirty air, which causes millions of premature deaths each year. Marine plastic pollution has increased tenfold since 1980, swirling the oceans with currents of plastics and in the guts of fish and seabirds. We throw away 50 million tons of electronic waste every year. That is roughly equal to the weight of all commercial airliners ever made, every year that we throw away. So the pandemic is worsening the waste problems with tens of millions of disposable protective equipment that we throw away every day. And the core driver of these three crises is unsustainable consumption and production. Since 1970, trade has grown tenfold. We are consuming more. The global economy has grown nearly fivefold. Extraction of natural resources and energy has tripled, and the world population has doubled. But throughout this growth, we have expected that the planet could keep on giving, no matter how badly we treat it. We grew reliant on fossil fuels. We rushed to convert lands for agriculture, for infrastructure, for urban expansion. We emptied the waters of fish in exchange for plastic and toxic sludge. And the end result are those three planetary crises. So friends, as UNEP's recent Making Peace with Nature report laid out, we need urgent transformation in these three areas. We have to tackle the Earth's environmental emergencies and human well-being as one indivisible challenge. We have to transform our economies, our financial systems to power the shift to sustainability. And we have to transform our food, our water and energy systems to meet the growing human needs in an equitable, resilient, and environmentally friendly manner. And so this year, governments have many, many ways to kickstart these transformations, because we have huge opportunity with pouring in trillions of dollars to pandemic recovery, and that's a fine thing. But these funds must be turned towards clean, green, and efficient energy, restoring nature services, promoting economic models that keep resources circulating within the economies rather than heading to the rubbish dump. In major events such as the Climate and Biodiversity Summits, which will happen later this year, governments now have the chance to really increase their commitments. They can promise stronger reductions to emissions, and more support for developing nations. They can put in place ambitious and meaningful targets to protect and restore nature and biodiversity, including through the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which we will be launching early next month. And they can and must immediately start turning decades of promises into action. But here's the thing, we cannot leave this all up to governments. We need a whole of society action for a whole of society problem. We need to take responsibility in every aspect of our professional lives. And look, humans excel at inventing new ways to be and to live, and we also excel at compartmentalizing. We might drive a hybrid vehicle and work at a fossil fuel company. We might work in fast fashion, but then we fret about microplastics in the ocean. We might work for a company that is complicit in the destruction of nature, but we go home in the evening and tell the kids to turn off the taps or the lights. None of that works. We can't keep compartmentalizing. This is hard, we know. We have so much to worry about, but we really have to try. We need to challenge ourselves to live more holistic life by following green guidelines and principles in our work and in our professional lives. And so that's what I really want to get to now. What will it take? Well, first, let's look at the means for the business owners tuning in today. And let me send a clear message for business. Sustainability is in your own best interest. The World Economic Forum has clearly stated that climate change and nature loss are massive risks to profitability. The financial implications for businesses and investors include reduced commodity yields, disrupted supply chains, and potential loss of new products. But also growing numbers of consumers are making the choices based on how business operate, and more will do so in the future rather than on what the business sells. For example, The Economist last year highlighted that 87% of young investors believe that corporate success should be measured by more than just financial performance. No business that wants to stay afloat long can afford to backing the status quo and ignoring this. So how do business go about transforming their operations? The first step is to start accounting for the value of nature and the planetary values in all operations. UNEP can already estimate the value of natural capital, the planet's stock of renewable and non-renewable natural resources. We're encouraging governments to use this alongside produced and human capital to give us a true and inclusive measure of growth. The same applies to businesses. If your business is making money in the short term, but damaging the planet in the long term, you need to reflect it in your balance sheet. And the next step is to set science-based targets for nature, for climate, and for pollution. No net loss biodiversity approach in your operation. Net zero approach, a climate net zero approach in your operations. Adopting circular models. It means also, of course, making sure that the toxic trail of pollution is stopped, ended, with clear time-bound steps being implemented. And so these are the kind of steps that we need to take. And another step is to hold suppliers and trading partners to the same standards. We are here talking about being comprehensive and holistic, not just for your business, but for the entire supply chain. The business internal operations can be squeaky clean, but if it's outsourcing environmental damage to elsewhere, you're still part of the problem. And all of this applies just as strongly to investors and bankers and insurance, because we all need investments to back sustainability. And we can no longer afford to have ethical finance somewhere on the fringes and in the feel-good area. In our work at UNEP, we're seeing ever stronger commitments on this front. We have 229 banks covering 45% of the global banking industry signed up to the UN Principles for Responsible Banking, aligning their businesses to society's biggest challenges. And for example, a group of them, 44 of them, have formed the Net Zero Banking Alliance, planning to fully carbonize their loan books. And a longer standing group of investors we established in 2019 called the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance is issuing 2025 portfolio emission reduction targets in the 19 to 20% 29% range. Now, these investors realize that they can't decarbonize themselves unless the underlying industries they support also head in that direction. So crucially, these processes and commitments, for them to be credible, we need to see fully transparent, third-party assessed, and grounded in science. Why? Of course, to avoid greenwashing. Greenwashing is that cynical attempt to gain the financial benefits of a sustainable profile without doing the hard work. It harms our efforts to build better, and it has to stop, and businesses have to be part of stopping it. The principles for responsible banking are addressing this by establishing a civil society advisory board to guide signatories on the difficult environmental and social challenges and requiring banks that have signed up to report on the principles implementation to be third-party assessed to ensure credible compliance. And meanwhile, in the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, we have established a scientific advisory body to guide them in designing sectoral emission pathways. So that was a little bit about what business owners need to think about and do. But second, I want to talk about what it means for students today of INSEAD or of other places that are preparing to enter the workplace. Because look, previous generations, and that includes mine, have left you with a legacy of environmental devastation and a system that you now must help to change. It's unfair, I know, but you, as the next generation of leaders, you can and must be those change makers. I'm not going to list the sustainable career choices that you have because you all know that. And equally, you can easily go and figure out for yourself, for the businesses, what they're doing and so on. And whether they are in compliance with the kind of things I've outlined below. That's a valid choice to enter these businesses that are already in compliance. But if you want to make a real difference, to become a real change maker, you need to step into where the system is broken, because preaching to the converted isn't going to make that difference that we need to see in our societies. So we need to be brave and fearless people inside the corporates. We need strong and young voices, not worn down or subsumed by a company culture, to be that flea in the ear, the conscience, the voice of reason that forces corporates to move beyond lip service to sustainability and start doing something meaningful. Now, another option is, of course, that is just as valuable, is to start your own green business. If the old companies won't change, displace them. You can take advantage of that growing demand for green and sustainable products, services, and companies, you with your startups. And we are in desperate need of new ideas and innovations that can provide solutions to our planetary woes. Every year, UNEP's Young Champions of the Earth Awards identifies young entrepreneurs across the world who come up with groundbreaking ideas and we provide them then with seed funding. You could be one of them. So I've spoken about businesses, I've spoken about young people. Now I want to take a look at our own personal responsibility in our lives and what we need to do. Because as I said earlier, we can't compartmentalize. Even if we green our business operations, take on the systems from within and come up with something revolutionary, we have to carry the fight back home into our personal lives. We all need to choose greener form of transport. Look at our diets, be it cutting back on meat or buying seasonally or buying locally. Cut our food waste. Move away from fast fashion to clothes that last. Buy secondhand, repair, reuse, recycle. Choose green energy providers where you have a choice. As with institutional investors, put our money through ethical finance. There's so many options to reduce our individual impact. And these kinds of choices are also what drive other businesses to change their business models. It won't always be easy, particularly when students live on a budget, but we all have to try to do this. And we must remember that we also have another choice that we take into the voting booth. And here I'd like to say sustainability is not a left or right issue. It is a long-term survival issue. It is an intergenerational justice and equity issue. We need to get on the right side of history and vote for leaders who will do the right thing by the planet, and in so doing by us and by our children. And we can't look back to those who would close off borders and look at narrow self-interest alone. There are no more narrow self-interests today. The environmental threats that we face are all-encompassing. A cloud of toxic air pollution will not stop at a checkpoint at a border and hand over its passports. And if we're learning one thing from COVID-19, it is that if one person has COVID, we all have COVID. And the same goes for environmental and planetary destruction, climate change, etc. It is a global phenomenon and it needs global action. Now, friends, I know that it seems like I'm asking a lot, and yes, I am. But I would not be asking this if there were any other way. There is no single quick fix to fix the planetary crisis. There's no vaccine for the planet. Technology can only take us so far. No nation or company or investor or individual can do it alone. But if each of us do our part in all aspects of our lives, we can retain and extend all the benefits of human ingenuity in a way that puts us back in harmony with nature. We can all find a way to live together on a planet of peace and prosperity and equality. We can all be the change makers. Thank you.
Very much, Inger. I'm alone here in this studio, but I feel like I should still, applaud. Thanks for being an inspiration. And I will start with that in thanking you. I think it's also important for people like me who work in that field to see you as a woman leader on these issues. I thought I should thank you for that because it does matter. I take away also from you the message to our students that we'll also extract from the keynote you just made to say that really they can be entrepreneur and intrapreneur for change. And I think that's very important because there is a lot of space there for this creativity that we need. And the final point I'm taking away is that at the end of the day, the business, the investment banker, we're all humans. Right? And so it's all led by humans. And if we all show up with our full values, when we invest, when we work, when we vote, when we parent, this can be really, at the heart of coalitions. So thank you very much for this. Thanks for joining us today and for being an inspiration.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Let me now turn to our next conversation. So Inger has clearly mapped out the challenge at hand, but also who can do what as part of the solution. And a very important actor in that process is the board, the part of an organization that keep an eye on the long term, the part also that branch out to other actors outside of the organization to hopefully create these coalitions and to lead that conversation with some board members. I'm delighted to welcome my colleague, Sonia Tatar. She's with me working at INSEAD, where she leads two important centers when it comes to the questions we're talking about. One on corporate governance, so that's about the boards and the role of the boards, that's what she'll be discussing about today. And another one on family businesses. Same thing, family business, because of their own structure, also have an important role to play in the transition to a decarbonized economy. Sonia is also a member of Chapter 0 here in France, and she's another member of the Women Coalition for Change at INSEAD, so I'm delighted to welcome her. Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katell, and a pleasure for me to be here to join you, Katell, and join as well the ChangeNOW team to call all of us for change and call for action. It's a pleasure for me to be here to moderate this dialogue session that is continuing on the theme of building coalition. Of course, we can see that there is a mounting urgency and there is an increased pressure to accelerate momentum towards climate governance. And the boards of directors, they ought to act like activists in a way, to steward and to change basically the situation today with the climate, but also to drive a positive change. So it's critical for board of directors, non-executive directors, to build this coalition with executives, to build coalition with key stakeholders, whether these are internal or external, to be able to address the climate change and advance the climate change agenda. So to elaborate further on this, I have a great pleasure to welcome here with me Monica de Virgiliis, who is chair of the board and president of Chapter 0 France, Gilles Vermot Desroches, who is senior vice president, corporate citizenship and institutional affairs at Schneider Electric. And also I have here with me Augustin Boulot, who is executive director of Biolab France. So hopefully, you know, I'll see them here with us to take the conversation, because as we mentioned, is that basically the board has a critical role to play in driving and stewarding the climate change agenda. So to kick off the dialogue, let me see if actually, I see if we have Monica here with us, Gilles Vermot here. I see also Augustin. Welcome, Augustin. Welcome, Monica. And we will have Gilles with us. So let me kick off the conversation. Thank you again, Monica, for being here. Thank you, Augustin, for being here. Such a pleasure to have you here. Of course, this dialogue is very intensive. We wish we have more time to discuss, but here, of course, let us focus on the key messages we would like to share with our audience today. So the first, let me kick off and open the dialogue with a question to both of you, as Gilles join us as well, is that in your opinion, why do you think that a multi-stakeholder, a multi-level coalition is so critical to effectively address climate change? So Monica, maybe you would like to take the first floor, the first on this.
Sure. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Gilles. Good to see you. So thank you for inviting me today. The topic is crucial, and I really love this panel. The net zero economy equation assumes sufficient volumes of electricity from renewable at a competitive price. This is the elephant in the room. And this is only achievable with an innovative and close cooperation between industry and politics, and it requires collaboration across the value chains. So coalition among competitors, which were unimaginable yesterday, are happening today. Inger has mentioned the Net Zero Banking Alliance, the Net Zero Insurance Alliance, but there are also collaboration across the value chain among competitors. So things were coalition unimaginable yesterday because we were all afraid of anti-competition law. We are pushing a little bit the edge, and under pre-competitive consideration, we are working even with competitors today, and even influencing politics for the good. So this transition requires a full rewiring of the way we operate. And this is not a battle we can win in isolation.
Thank you, Monica. Augustin, would you like to give your perspective on this?
Sure, thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you guys. I think when we look at what it is to be a stakeholder-driven economy, and this is something that we carry within the B Corp movement, you need to look at the organization as a holistic platform that doesn't only create value for its shareholders. And I think when you talk about tackling challenges like climate, like equitable distribution of wealth, that's where stakeholder governance and stakeholder-driven organizations are absolutely key. When businesses and organizations take care of their multiple stakeholders, obviously that can only strengthen wider ecosystems. Whether as if you're in a competitive mind frame, and you try to beat the other, you're obviously weakening your wider ecosystems. I think that's something that we've seen with the COVID crisis, is that if you manage to make your ecosystems stronger by considering stakeholders in your decision making, and by always trying to build value for multiple stakeholders, that's how you make stronger ecosystems that are more durable. And not weaker ecosystems. And that's, I think, one of the big challenges. It's also one of the big shifts in the way organizations are going to work in the future. And hopefully more and more organizations will understand that it's not by making others weaker that they will become stronger. It's by making everyone else stronger, by creating value for the many, that they in themselves will become stronger organizations.
Thank you, Augustin. Great to hear all of this from Monica and you yourself. Now, Gilles, your perspective from, of course, we come back to Schneider Electric example and what you're doing there. In your opinion, why do you think that multi-stakeholder and multi-level coalition is critical to address the climate change?
Thank you for this time, and thank you for this meeting. Why it's critical? It's critical because we are just in the middle of two times. The last times, during the last 20 years, was a time to put in place, for example, stakeholder dialogue and the vision that the company has about sustainability. It's not a very old thing for our company, but during the 20 last years, we organize a lot of things to understand better the consequence of climate change, biodiversity, some other big trends. And the institutional actors, UN, states, or some other actors like NGOs, ask a company to be involved and to provide the agenda of the solutions, especially to go in the low carbon society. And during these 20 years, we organize a lot of tools to manage that, to know how we have to tackle the questions with a carbon footprint, with matrix of materiality, a lot of standardization, some ratings, TCFD, SBTI, CDP, and so on. And now we are in a new time where we ask the company to be the actor of the change, to contribute to the transformation. And for that, it's more a question of impact and a question of vision for the company which will be profitable on performance in the future, are company which are able to choose together performance, efficiency, profit from today, and sustainability. And for that, the new words to speak about all this topic, it's a question of impact. Not only to be better in the manner to produce, in the manner to be in the society, but to be sure that we focus a good impact to reduce the problem. In this question, thanks to stakeholder dialogue, the companies understand better the situation. Certainly, they open the windows on the society to understand how, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals are key to understand the future, and it's better to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals than to try to continue a business which is far from that or in the opposite side. But for that now, it's a question of value. And my vision is it's not only for the future a question of discussion with stakeholders, but it's a question, a new question to build panels, to build a new manner to work together, to build coalition, and to make efficient the dialogue with stakeholders. The dialogue with stakeholders, it's key to understand the future. Now, in the new step, it's more a question of system value with stakeholders to build something together.
Thank you, Gilles. Thank you so much. And of course, we'll come back to you in a while and you can share with us your experience with Schneider. So back to you, Monica, a couple of questions. And from the board perspective, balancing the main priorities and focusing on climate is critical. What do you see the key role of non-executives play in mobilizing other stakeholders to advance this climate agenda?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'm sitting on two listed company boards, which are impacted in multiple ways by this transformation. And as a board, our normal routine are impacted. The way we plan risk and anticipate risk is impacted. The cycle time of risk analysis is expanded. New risks are rising, opportunities are rising. So the boards need to make a step change in driving the strategy for the company they serve, because we are no longer in a business as usual context. The board in a business as usual context acts as a validator of the management strategy. In a context of disruption as we are, the board has to play a much more active role, because the choices are not straightforward. There are a lot of unknowns and bets in the future. We are relying on technologies which were not, we don't know which cost we'll have at the time we plan to use them. So the risk can be high. So in order to play an active role and being a real active partner of the management, the board has to develop a much thicker knowledge of the options. So, and as Gilles was saying, the view and the engagement, the dialogue with the shareholders and the stakeholders is key. So with the customers, with the talents below the C-suite to develop this thicker knowledge. So we need to have a better knowledge of the market, of how the demand will evolve, the expectation of our shareholders, and having a dialogue with them beyond the proxy season. So all these new captors, sensor information has to be integrated in the way the board works in a much more active way to support and to challenge the management.
Yeah, and thanks, Monica. And building on that, you mentioned challenge. What are some of the challenges that boards need to consider, need to overcome to benefit from the collective resources, from the collective competencies in building this climate alliance and also in building, the strategy and moving forward?
I see three major challenges. One is new competence to develop. Two is time in the board agenda to discuss scenarios and plan for the future. We have spent a little time in planning. We kind of neglected a bit the planning. And then three, considering externalities. Inger was saying integrating the cost of nature, the cost of natural capital, integrating. So we really, in whatever investment decision, we need to consider externalities across the value chain and also multiple capital. So these three things, these three challenges require from the board members quite a lot of investment, and based on the understanding of these three challenges, together with many other board members across the world, we have created the chapter zeros across the world. Chapter zero are places across the world for directors to learn together, for a peer-to-peer dialogue, and to learn from experts. So sharing experiences where we failed, where we succeeded, which formula we used to succeed. And there are new challenges that we can collectively address because they are very common. So this is my take.
Thank you so much, Monica, and great insights. Let's move to the executive insights here with Gilles. Gilles, Schneider is leading the way when it comes to climate positive impact and transition. What do you think has helped the organization progress in this agenda? Knowing that, of course, you spoke about the dialogue, multi-stakeholder dialogue. So can you tell us more about, the examples of Schneider?
Okay, we have to be humble to be an example. I can express the journey of Schneider Electric first. I consider that the leadership in the company is key. And certainly during the 20 last year, Henri Lachmann and now Jean-Pascal Tricoire have a strong idea of what is leadership, the purpose and the vision for the future, the fact that it's better to have courage today to change than to change after when it's too late. The fact that they consider that the company has to be inclusive and take care to vulnerability. Perhaps you can consider that it's far from our topic, but the vision that we have, and I remember very well at the beginning of this century, when Schneider Electric designed our principle of responsibility, which is a new skeleton to express the responsibility of Schneider Electric about business affairs, diversity, environment, city, society, and so on. It was certainly the first time that a company put all these topics in the same charter, in the same guidelines for all the managers. It's very important. Because when I say to go on this direction, we need to have a leader who is agile and in the same time who take care to vulnerability. It's true for poor people. It's true to change the reality in an engineer company between men or women. It's true for many things, but it's true for climate too, because climate was and continue to be the vulnerability, the fragility of the planet. And the first thing is that. The second thing, it's in Schneider Electric, that is true in our business, that is true in our reality. We are a data-driving company. Why? It's because we consider that to organize energy efficiency, to be able to have a carbon footprint, and with a carbon footprint to reduce carbon emission to go to the low carbon society, we need to measure. Not only to measure one time each year, but to measure each quarter and sometimes each month, to be sure that we use this measure to progress. And it's true in sustainability too. The tools that we have in Schneider Electric, our Schneider Sustainability Impact, that we change each 5 years with relevant KPIs that we measure each quarter, that we publish each quarter, it's key, first, to push the progress. Second, to communicate, even if sometimes we are far from the goals that we expected. But after the will of the boss, this tool, this data, are key to understand the reality and to progress. And last but not least, about the relationship between the boss, the teams, and the board, which is key now to continue to accelerate the progress. My personal experience is very interesting. 20 years ago, never, when I was at the beginning of my job of sustainable development vice president, never I had meeting with the board. 10 years ago, each year, one time, two times, I was in a board meeting to express what we we were doing in terms of environment, social, citizenship, and so on. And the board members say, oh, it's very good to do that, blah, blah, blah. It's very interesting. Now it's very different. I don't have time to express all my presentation. Why? Because a lot of board members have a lot of experience on this topic. And we organize a discussion about that. And it's key because when we are speaking about impact, we are speaking about value creation. And last but not least, in Schneider Electric, never we put somewhere responsibility, especially in back office and in another places, performance, profitability, and the relationship with our clients. We consider that we are a business. The best manner for a business to contribute to a better world, to the common good, to reduce climate change, it's to transform our responsibility in our back office, the manner that we have to perform, to an offer for our clients, and to build a tribe together to go ahead is certainly a part of the answer to your question.
Thank you so much, Gilles. And I'm sure we can talk even longer and longer on this. However, of course, I'm cautious of time. Thank you so much. Very insightful. Now, back to you, Augustin. To move commitment to action, it takes more than just forming collaborations, more than joining coalitions. Can you share with us how BLab work with organizations to ensure that their sustainability actions, and notably the relative to the climate, that are achieving the desired outcome? Over to you. Thank you, Augustin.
Thank you, Sonia. Absolutely. I think the B-Lab organization and with it the B Corp movement looks at a couple of things, and we've decided to act and help companies act on a wide number of things. The first one I'd say is on measuring their impact. So we provide a framework that helps companies measure their impact. I really enjoyed what Gilles just said, saying that when you talk about impact, you talk about value creation. And we need to help drive organizations to positively create value for their multiple stakeholders. So the first item is helping companies measure their impact. We have an incredible tool called the B Impact Assessment that helps companies do that. B Corp or not B Corp, it doesn't matter. The tool is for everyone. And that helps companies measure and manage their impact on 5 different aspects of the company: the governance, the employees, the community, the clients, and the fifth one, which is one of the most important pillars, is the planet, the environment. I think another aspect that we help companies with is transparency. It's really important these days to help companies become more transparent on all these aspects, and something that's really powerful with the B Corp movement is that companies are transparent on their impact. They're transparent on what they measure and how they achieve what they measure, the impact that they achieve through what they measure. Each B Corp company, for example, has a public profile where you can see their impact score. And so, in a sense, the positive value that they create on these different stakeholders. I'll give you just a couple of numbers. Over the last year, over 2020, B Corps around the world have demonstrated the ability to protect over 200,000 hectares of land, save over 220 million liters of water, and divert over 200,000 metric tons of waste. I know these are numbers, and they might seem a little barbaric, but it's to show you an example of what we can do to help organizations measure their impact, deliver on impact, and be transparent about it, because it's really important for companies and organizations who are tackling these issues to be transparent about what they're tackling. And then the third item, which is really important in what we do, is we push companies, and for those who want to become B Corp companies, it's an obligation to put these commitments into their bylaws. We're fundamentally convinced that if a company goes all the way on these topics and can start to put these commitments into their bylaws, they're taking an extra step. Because in a company, you can have people, a board, bosses, leaders, teams, but these people will always come and go in a sense. And the fact that you build this into the bylaws of the company, you're really making sure that the company sticks with these commitments, regardless of the people who are driving it. And obviously, a company is built around the people who work in it, but it's really important for a company to build these commitments into their bylaws. And then we're on a session where we're talking about coalitions. And I've mentioned these 3 items, but I really believe that coalitions, movements, community building is going to be really, really important to help companies. No company, organization, leader can do this alone. There are challenges, there are setbacks. It's difficult, and if tackling these climate issues had been easy, hopefully we would have been able to do it by now. But it's not easy. And being part of a coalition, of a community of leaders, of organizations who are facing these challenges is also something that we encourage companies to do. That's also what the B Corp movement is about this community of businesses getting together, sharing their challenges, the issues that they're working on, and that helps them. It helps them improve, progress, take bigger steps, and work together. Because when you have someone who's already gone through your challenges and can help you out, you can go faster. And that's what coalitions and community building are about, and that's what we help organizations do as well.
Thank you so much, Augustin. And we have just 2 more minutes left. If I can make a round and ask each of you just to give me maybe 2 words or brief sentence. What is your take on, what's your advice into building, making this happen, making the movement, please, on climate change from the board perspective, Monica, from the executive perspective, Gilles, and from external stakeholder, from you, Augustin. So Monica, very quickly.
I go for no ego, open collaboration, and pragmatic approach.
Thank you, Monica. Gilles, over to you. Interesting, Monica.
To be a front runner, we need to build a system thinking. And today, it's not to have the cherries on the cake in the company to take care to climate. It's to be in the middle of the bread and to put this topic in each decision. And for that, to be supported by the understanding and sometimes the manner to be demanding by the board members.
Thank you, Gilles. And Augustin, your last word.
Thanks, Sonia. I'll be very down to earth. And maybe one piece of advice, when you're in front of a decision, and so you're at a decision-making table, always leave a seat open for the planet. It's our home. And so it needs to be a part of all the decisions we make. When you're in your household and you make a decision, I'm sure you all think about the impact it's going to have on your house or your apartment or your garden or whatever. And if leaders and decision makers, when they're at a decision-making table, can leave a seat open for the planet, I'm sure we'll make some steps towards making it happen.
Thanks so much, Augustin. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Gilles. Thank you, Augustin. Very great insights. Pleasure having you. And here, over to you, Katell. Thank you.
Augustin, thank you very much. Here at the studio, I do have an open seat for the planet. just telling you because I'm missing not being with you in person. Thank you very much for your contribution and your insights. Let's now move to the final segment of this session on coalition. And what we've heard a lot through this conversation is that no one can do everything, but everybody can do something. And I'm delighted to welcome two leaders who are walking the talk on that. They have designed, both of them, and led some coalitions. Our first guest is Andrew Higham. He is the CEO of Mission 2020. Mission 2020 was created in the aftermath of the Paris Agreement to accelerate progress towards decarbonization by 2050. Before doing that, he was working with the UN FCCC, so the UN Framework for Climate Change, where he worked very closely with the then CEO of UNFCCC to really work with her to sign the Paris Agreement in 2015. He's a climate expert. You can check his bio. He's the person making things happen on that front. I'm also delighted to welcome Abul Kalam Azad, who is the special envoy for the Climate Vulnerable Forum. This forum is an initiative that brings together all the economies which are the most vulnerable to climate change. And we want to hear more about how that forum functions. Special Envoy Azad has decades of experience in his own government in Bangladesh. He's worked on business and climate change, on how to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a pleasure to have the two of you here today with us at ChangeNOW. And Andrew, I'm going to start with you. I mean, we just met a few days ago, but when you told me your story, I was very intrigued. I mean, I saw that you probably didn't sleep for weeks to get to the conclusion of the Paris Agreement, and then you woke up the next day and created yet something new, Mission 2020. So can you tell me why this happened, where that insight came from, and what Mission 2020 does?
Well, thank you, Katell. I mean, I have to take you back to that glorious moment when we adopted the Paris Agreement. But remember, leading up to it, we knew that we were short. We knew that we were on track for 3 degrees worse. And while we had adopted a legally binding instrument, we also knew that we had to double down now. We had to deliver on it. We had to bend the curve in emissions by 2020. So Mission 2020 was designed as a collective campaign. All of those people who had delivered the Paris Agreement, this was our challenge to them. Let's do it again. Let's bend the curve in emissions by 2020. And the objectives were reach this climate turning point by 2020, ensure the 1.5 degree as the new north, and prepare the climate community for the decisive decade ahead that we see now leading up to 2030. And I think, we've seen these wonderful achievements since Paris, like a 10x scale up of finance sector commitments, similar scale from all other actors around the world. 1.5 is now the norm. No one considers 2 degrees as credible anymore. And we have bent the curve in emissions. There is, of course, this risk of rebound post-COVID, and now we need to see COP26 deliver so that we can put this on a 1.5 degree pathway.
And Andrew, in creating that campaign, the next day after the Paris Agreement, what were some of the key challenges that you faced in trying to bring all the actors together?
Well, I think the first was to believe that this was possible and inject energy into the community. We really tried to inject this sense of urgency and optimism. As you can see from my shirt,
I was about to ask you to show us.
But, it's this can-do attitude. We can do this if we work together. And I think that's the attitude we need to take into this next decade.
Yeah. I also saw that you, as part of the campaign, you came down with some very specific actions that everybody could take, right? I saw some of the video you put together, which is really breaking down a very complex problem like climate change and giving like the six, I forgot if it's six, I think it's six, huh? The six action you can take now, right?
Yes, and I think that's we do face that challenge now. We need clarity on what it's going to take to for us all. And I think, you know, if you're a startup CEO, if you're a business leader, having a clear set of targets is very powerful.
Yeah, we were in a conversation this morning on biodiversity as well, and what most leaders were telling us was, you know, it seems so complicated and unachievable. So I think what you've done with Mission 2020 could really be useful, you know, to also integrate or think about biodiversity goals as well. So just something that came to my mind when I looked at some of the successes that you've had. Special Envoy Azad, welcome as well. Thanks for joining us. So as I mentioned, you are working within one coalition, right, which is really bringing all the most vulnerable economies together to see how they can address climate change jointly, and also how they can learn from one another. We just heard that the peer learning was important. Now, within that, you took the leadership to create the Climate Prosperity Plan, and you've applied that to Bangladesh. So can you first help me understand how you move from climate vulnerability to climate prosperity in a country like Bangladesh, and then tell me more about this plan and what it looks like?
Thank you, Katell, for your question. So first of all, I want to thank Inger for her nice keynote, especially her call for generational climate justice. It's an excellent proposition. So again, thanks for the panelists, experts from private sector, showing the way green with solar and electric vehicles, along with structural and institutional change. So I would emphasize on initiative of public sector and involving all these stakeholders. So I would like to answer your question by sharing a brief story, a story of change from vulnerability to resilience, and then from resilience to prosperity. In 1970, a super cyclone Boulot in Bangladesh, it took not less than 500,000 lives. Still, United Nations cites this as the most disastrous natural disaster in the history. But last year, Amphan, with same magnitude, it could take only a few dozens of lives. A single life is very valuable, but how best we could do from 500,000 to a few dozens. So friends, these are just not numbers, but it speaks of our transition as a nation from vulnerability to resilience. So only day before yesterday, we were at the center of Cyclone Yas, so making heartbreaking headlines. Today, I speak here on behalf of 1.2 billion people of 48 climate vulnerable countries who are not only suffering, but they are moving ahead with the notion that no one can do everything, but still everyone can do something. And with that spirit, I was to mark our statement to move now from resilience to prosperity by introducing the Climate Prosperity Plan, which all vulnerable countries can adopt. As part of our long-term visionary plan, our Delta Plan 2100 to make a prosperous Bangladesh and strategic plan towards 2041 to be a developed country. In last October, our Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, who is the president of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, so she proposed a planetary prosperity agenda. So through the development of the Climate Prosperity Plan, so build forward stronger by changing a decade of robust socio-economic development. So we, Bangladesh, may not stop the sea level rise. An intrusion of saline water in our coastal belts, but we may transform how best we can make it. How can we make it a resource to shrimp culture, We can have saline-tolerant variety of crops and moderate livelihood with saline water. We may find ways how best we can turn the vulnerability of drought, flood, river erosion, and all other climate change. So climate prosperity plan are transformational strategic investment initiatives. In this plan, we devised and driven by a singular ambition to roll out early economy-wide and ambitious renewable energy adaptation and resilience strategy. Finally, I would like to emphasize that climate prosperity is our collective shift. It is shift from the vulnerability to resilience and from resilience to prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially Envoy Azad. I mean, I think it's very inspiring to hear this shift that you're operating in Bangladesh. Also, I mean, from a governmental perspective, but also bringing together all the other actors. As through the Climate Vulnerability Forum, you are trying to inspire other countries to do the same. And maybe not just the vulnerable ones, but also the heavily polluting one. What are the lessons that you can share from your experience in Bangladesh with these other countries, just so that they follow suit?
So again, thanks. So our climate prosperity plan is named after our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And I'm pleased to announce that this climate vulnerability and climate prosperity plan will be launched maybe in next July by our Honorable Prime Minister. So Bangladesh has a vast experience to be a climate resilient country, which I mentioned at the beginning. So this priceless experience, along with experience towards climate prosperity, needs to be shared with all other vulnerable countries and other polluting countries. So under the Mujib plan, we will prepare a template which can bring opportunity to prepare a tailor-made climate prosperity plan, which the vulnerable countries will adopt according to their needs and according to their priorities. So Bangladesh is the first country to launch this climate prosperity plan. We used to extend our hands so that all our vulnerable countries can share in one platform. And we will work together to encourage and facilitate all CVF countries to develop their climate prosperity plan and encourage their economic and investment partnership to join with us. We definitely encourage scaling to other countries, which will be done through the CVF as a forum of our global south. As I mentioned, these 48 countries with South-South and triangular cooperation. Obviously, CPP, this encourage a whole of society approach to build resilience in a coordinated and collaborative manner. Coalition for collective action underpins the success of climate prosperity plan. I believe we can move forward with this proposition of taking together all in our journey.
Thank you very much, Special Envoy. I think what's important here is to see, again, we've heard that a number of times, the importance of country coming together to learn from one another. And in the case, when you mention triangular cooperation, for those who are not familiar with that term, it's also more advanced economy, learning from most vulnerable economies in terms of building their own resilience and prosperity. So I think that's a very important message to take home with us today. Andrew, let me go back to you now, and you can drop the jacket so that we see your full tagging. So it's stubborn climate. With move a little bit your camera so again we can see the full thing. Optimist, yes. Isn't that the name of the podcast as well?
Yes,
yes.
That's right. I mean, but let me just say, how inspiring is it to listen to the Special Envoy talking about how the most vulnerable countries in the world are seeing this transition as a great opportunity, and that is in itself an expression of this stubborn climate optimism.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's really some of the key takeaways we need to spread here with all our audience. And let's make sure I don't know if we have some teams also who can put the link to the Climate Prosperity Plan, just so that people can go and learn more. So Andrew, Mission 2020 was, aimed to end with COP26, right, last year. which has been postponed to this year. So what's next in terms of your activities as a stubborn climate optimist?
Well, I think that we all have to remain focused on the challenge of this year. Yep. And you know, this is quite a historic year. We can create a great regeneration out of the COVID pandemic, and we can do it in a way which is going to generate, you know, this amazing sort of growth and prosperity, as the Special Envoy has suggested. And we need to get behind these plans of national governments this year. We really need to see the maximum delivery of ambition. I think beyond that, though, we can, as a community, start to go deeper in the sort of commitments and coalitions that we're building around very tangible problems and opportunities. And I think that's what we need to do in order to sort of bolster the next step from national governments. I'd just say, I think that the other thing that's going to be really important is the health of our community. We have to go universal. We have to grow this community so it's everywhere. And I think as I have spent quite a lot of time thinking about how this community functions, like I think there's three things that we have to pay attention to now. One is the accountability and credibility of the commitments that are being made. Yeah. The second is the trust and the glue between the actors in the space. And I'd just say that I think the role that women leaders are playing in this community is very, very important, and we really have to support that. And I think the final thing is the importance, you said this before, Katell, the shared narratives across the biodiversity, the sustainable development, the climate, and human rights movements. I think that's going to be very important in the years ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for pointing to this important principle that really are transpiring through this summit here. So I think that resonates. And for people, have a look out that a report will be being published, really unpacking the need for these three principles. We need to wrap up. So Andrew, we have, I don't know how many people are watching, but there is a big audience here of people who want to change. What's your call to action for this crowd here who want to step things up?
Well, I would be inspired by the Special Envoy. I would get out there into developing countries all around the world and support the transition, make jobs happen, make exciting things. But you know, while you're doing that, also speak to some of your politician friends and tell them how important it is that they make COP26 a success, that their national governments come forward with greater ambition.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Special Envoy Azad, I have to give you the last word. You are the experts here. You have turned things around in your country, inspiring us. So what is your call for action for the audience of ChangeNOW 2021?
Thank you. So I want to take this moment to remember a time when Bangladesh was fighting for its freedom. Our visionary leader, father of the nation, Bangabandhu, he declared in his landmark speech on 7th March 1971, the words are, quote, "We don't know defeat." I can still feel the power of his statement. And again, quote, "No one can surpass us." A very powerful statement in Bangla. In Bangla, we call dabaye rakhte parba na. It created boundless strength and courage to the common people to fight the freedom and later on build the country with all we see together. With the advent of his birth centenary now and the 50th anniversary of our independence, we see this great legacy being taken forward by his able daughter, our present Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who is currently the chair of CVF and has started herself in our war against nature we don't lose always. And she told, quote, so the time to take action to save the planet is not tomorrow, but today. And with that spirit, I want to echo with both their vision, calling for global efforts for 1.5 degree and immediate action, because now we are at a war footing with unprecedented climate crisis, because climate change is real and it is happening. The same thing is done by Andrew today. He also told we can do so many things. So time is now. Thank you.
Special Envoy Azad, thank you so much. Andrew, thank you. I think that's the perfect ending. Time for change is now, and this is what brought us together here. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.